few months talking to health companies and sort of trying to figure out where and how blockchain tech could be useful in this space. And it's still pretty early, and there's a lot of there's a lot of different approaches that people are taking right now, and there's still a lot of uncertainty about which approach is going to win out. And I just kind of wanted to cover some of the main things that I see that are important in this space. But before that, I just wanted to mention something funny that happened to me earlier today. So there's this obscure rock band that I'm kind of a fan of, and I wanted to. It's been taking them forever to come out with a new album, so I wanted to give them a little donation, and so I sent them an email saying, hey, I want to donate some money so that you guys can record some music, and in the email I said, well, I can send you either US dollars or I could send you Ethereum. And here was the email they sent back. So they said, wow, this is very nice of you, thank you. And then they say, Dave and I discussed that we would think the best thing would be for you to make a smart contract for us in Ethereum that gets released when we release the 3 songs we're in the middle of recording. That way Nathan will have an incentive to finish his vocals, and I'll finish my keyboard parts. And hopefully the amount appreciates in the meantime. If you give it to us now, at least 3 of the guys would want fiat immediately. So anyway, if you guys want to talk with me later about how exactly it would make sense to implement this, I would love to hear it. So since this is recorded, I'll probably still do some blog posts of this. I'll keep the name of the band unknown, but they're like super obscure. And I'm not just saying that because I want to sound like a hipster. They're really obscure. So I've talked to a lot of people in the healthcare space about blockchain technology, and there's challenges with that. And I think at the end of the day, the core challenge is that IT, the way we handle data in IT, is still very much based in a sort of a pre-internet world. And in a pre-internet world, handling data in a company was very simple. You collect the data, and then because the internet doesn't exist, there's only one place you can put that data. You can put it into a database. And so it was very clear. You collect data. Where do you put it? You put it in a database. And this kind of view of data, especially in medicine, which is very conservative, has kind of persisted into the internet age. And part of the reason it keeps persisting like this is the same sort of thinking that always goes on in the NSA. Where they anytime the NSA collects data, what do? You put a stamp on it that says it's top secret. And then all of a sudden, all this data that they collect isn't useful because nobody's allowed to look at it. And this is the same situation. If we put our data in a siloed database inside our company, we can't get fired because we were too open with our information. So this is kind of the world that I think, in general, we have to get out of, and where blockchain plays a role. Now, how is the world different now that there's the internet? Well, the way it's different is that we have to start thinking about the fact that when we have data, there's certain types of data that we want only a few people to be able to read. There's other types of data that we want many people to be able to read. And similarly, there are some types of data we want only a few people to be able to write, and other types of data that we want many people to be able to write. So once you're dealing with an internet where you have large amounts of people, you can kind of make this matrix of different types of data. And the idea here is basically that different types of data have different requirements in terms of how you want to share it and what kind of privacy you want, and that should change where you store that. So there isn't a one-size-fits-all solution, which is that we just stick everything in the database. And I've talked to radiology vendors, and there are systems out there where you go into the hospital, and if you enter in a patient's blood pressure, you use a certain software system, And then if an inspector comes and inspects a piece of radiology equipment, what do they do? They go to the exact same terminal and they enter in the inspection report, and it goes into the exact same database. So the inspection report for a piece of equipment and the patient's blood pressure it's all just data, right? We just stick it in the database. So that, to me, that doesn't make a lot of sense. So what sort of fits into these different categories? Well, there's definitely, in medicine, there's HIPAA-sensitive patient data. So this is data that, from a legal standpoint, has to be protected. That's sensitive, that's patient data. And clearly, you want few people to be able to read that data, and you want only very few people to be able to write that data. So there's no question on that. But now there's other pieces of data. Obviously there's communications like email. So communications information, you want anyone to really be able to send an email into a company. But then you want very strict rules for who can read that information. So this is a type of data that only appeared once the internet existed. And then another type of data is social media. So you as a company, there's data out there about your company that anyone can write and anyone can read. And this is basically things like ratings and reviews of your products. And this is now another form of data that you have to think about. And then there's the last square. So this is the square that you want many people to be able to read this information, but you want very few people to be able to write it. You want very strong write controls over that data. So this is kind of a weird space. And what belongs in there is things like registries. So things like license registries for doctors, equipment registries, and then things like supply chain data, such as following a chemical that's used for a pharmaceutical through the supply chain, and making sure what the different parties are that it came through. So this is all data. If you have a registry of medical licenses, you want to be very, very clear who is allowed to write that data. And there have to be very strict and very complicated rules for making alterations to the licensing data. But you want anybody to be able to read that. So the medical licenses are a public piece of data, and the more open they're available, the better it is for that information. And this field right here, in my view, is the one where blockchain is the ideal solution. So blockchain, by its nature, blockchain does not prevent anyone from reading the data in a blockchain. Anyone can download the Ethereum or Bitcoin blockchain and see the entire history of all accounts that have ever existed. But the place where you do have, where you do need very strong security is around who's allowed to alter those records. So you don't want people to be able to move $1 million out of a Ethereum account if they don't own that Ethereum account. And similarly, we can build a system where only specific employees in the government are allowed to update a medical license. And so this is what I think is like the easiest opportunity in medicine for blockchain technology. At some point I'm going to give a longer demo of the products we're working on. But this right here is one of our products, the higher licensing system, and we've been developing this with communication with the Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulation. It has lots of features. I'm not going to. This is a short demo, so I'm not going to go into it in detail. But basically what it does is it uses a smart contract on the Ethereum blockchain right now, just on a test network. And the smart contract knows who the employees are in the government, who the employees are at specific schools and other continuing education providers that give courses to doctors and other medical providers. And it knows, of course, who has administrator rights in the system. And so if we want to perform an action having to do with the medical license, we have to digitally sign it using the traditional Ethereum signing protocol for transactions. And then the smart contract will verify that signature belongs to somebody who has the right to perform the action that it's trying to perform. Yeah, so you can do lots of stuff with this software, but what I'm going to do right now is just show you what happens when we add a provider. So basically, I'm now functioning in the role of a government processor. Somebody just moved into the state of Illinois and filled out their paperwork to have a license in the state of Illinois, and I'm going to now enter in their license ID and their name. Roger Smith. Just in case there is a Roger. Something else there? Okay. Because I already have existing records in there. Oh, I just that's I'm sorry. So what happens when you give me a second here? Put my microphone down. 2016, submit. Yeah, and so this is very similar to Tony's app. We hit submit. We're using MetaMask, and a MetaMask transaction window pops up. So now I'm digitally signing as an employee of the state of Illinois that this person has a valid respiratory therapy license. After I hit submit, it's now being sent to the network. We're waiting for confirmation that the block was mine, which should happen shortly. Let's look in here. There we go. Transaction succeeded. And now, if we go back to the search screen, we can look for Smith, and Roger Smith is in here. It's supposed to be. Well, that's annoying. Why isn't Roger Smith there? Let me try one refresh. We might have a little demo glitch here. Yeah, there they are. Don't know what happened there. So Roger Smith, this is all on a public blockchain, just like Tony did. We can now go to Etherscan. We can look at the raw public data, and we can look at the smart contract. And you can see that 1 minute ago somebody submitted a new license in the system. So I just wanted to quickly show what we're actually working on. And at some point, I'll probably give a longer talk talking about the technical challenges of building these types of systems. And then just real quick, the thing that everybody, of course, talks to us about the moment we start talking about medicine and blockchain is, well, what every company really wants to do is they want to put medical data, patient data on a public blockchain. So they want to do this stuff, right? And the problem with that is that in order to come up with a decent way to privately and securely store patient data on a blockchain, there's like maybe 6 or 7 different properties your system has to have in order for it to be useful. And you can come up with lots of different systems that fall short on some of those 6 or 7 properties. And so you're always in this conversation where you say, oh, well, probably we can't put it on a public blockchain because it's a HIPAA violation. And they say, oh, well, we can encrypt it. And then you say, well, yeah, but if you encrypt it, then you can't do anything useful with the data because you need to, you want to run smart contracts against it. Then they say, well, you can use zero knowledge proofs. And then it just kind of keeps on going forever and ever in sort of a circle. And so I figured I would just kind of briefly go over what are the different options. How could you build a blockchain that can handle private patient data and actually be useful in a larger context? And I can come up with 8 different approaches, and a lot of these, there are companies that are doing these. And so far, I'm not really convinced that any of them are that useful. So the most obvious one everybody says is, oh, well, if it's patient data, why don't we just use Ethereum and we just encrypt the data before we put it in there? So the pros of using Ethereum and just putting encrypted patient data on there is it has great availability. So if you put somebody's blood pressure on the blockchain, chances are 100 years from now, you'll still be able to get that data. And it's very simple. So, all the technology for this exists. We can do this today. The problem, of course, is horrible, horrible scalability. You can store only a tiny amount of data in a cost-effective way on the Ethereum blockchain. You can run smart contracts against the data. So the whole promise of Ethereum and of blockchain technology is to build intelligent data. And you can't have intelligent data if your computer program can't read the data. And then the third problem is you still need a decryption key. Where is this decryption key going to be? You can't put that on the blockchain. It's going to have to be in a traditional server somewhere. And more importantly, if you have a patient record that's encrypted using a decryption key or an encryption key, then you're probably going to want multiple parties to be able to read that data, and you're going to have to pass that decryption key around multiple parties. And that's kind of a no-no in cryptography. You want everybody to have their own key and to never, ever, ever transmit a cryptography key to another party. We want to use something like public key encryption or some other mechanism. So that's the problem with using public chain encryption, for example. The second one is private chain. So why don't we just have a clone of the Ethereum network, we stick it into a hospital, and then we just make sure there's a firewall so nobody who's not allowed to can access it, and then we just put all the data in there. So this can work, and I think there might be value to doing it. It has good scalability because you have a blockchain for every hospital or whatever. Smart contracts are easy because you can just, in the actual hospital, the smart contract can read all the data, so you can do really interesting things. The problem is you haven't really solved the goal, which is one of the goals, which is to make the data available to legitimate parties that are not inside the hospital. So this isn't really a good way of sharing data, even when you want to share data. Then there's problems with data availability and auditability.